Welcome to the Divine Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, Mackenzie Foster, a professional psychic medium, tarot reader, and spiritual mentor, here to provide you with the next steps towards your dream reality, along with clarity and deep validation while on your spiritual journey. I have an immense passion for all things paranormal, spiritual, and of course, having some super fun chats with incredibly knowledgeable people. In each episode, we will expand our minds, ignite our inner psychics, embrace our spiritual awakening journeys, and live a super grounded, witchy life. I hope you learned something new in today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Divine Gossip Podcast. I have Brooke with me today, a very, very special guest, and I'm very excited to get to know better and to have on the podcast and to learn from today. All of our guest episodes have been so incredible, and I find that every guest I have on is always in such like divine, perfect timing, everything I need to hear in the moment. So I'm excited to hear where the conversation takes us. But first, Brooke, would you like to introduce yourself for the listeners, please?
Sure. So I am Brooke Deanne. I am an RTT therapist and a trauma recovery coach. So I really work with women and men to recover from childhood trauma, abusive relationships, religious abuse, religious trauma. So anything abuse, that is my domain. I really want to help people access their true inner self, their authentic self, and kind of shed the conditioning and the programming from the past that's just no longer serving anyone right
Mhm.
now in society, and being able to just move through things that they didn't think was possible so that they can really get out of the unstuckness and heal.
That is so cool and beautiful. That's a very important and respectable job that you have there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah,
Of course.
it's definitely not an easy job because, I always tell people like, I don't sugarcoat it. It's like going into the depths of hell at times, really accessing these parts of your trauma that you've blocked or that you've kind of set aside because your brain when it needed to protect you at that time. But it's also the access and the portal to your true healing and to your true self. So it's such a beautiful journey, even though it can be difficult at times, but being able to be really in your human experience and feel all of your emotions.
Yeah, I worked with a coach, a spiritual quantum healer. I don't know exactly what her titles were, but she was amazing. She taught me that. And I love that you stand for that. Like, because in the spiritual community, you hear so many people be like, only love and light. But you brought up a really good point where it's like that darkness is where you find your light. And that's what I found for sure in my journey.
Yes, you got that spot on. It's the part of the psyche that we don't really even realize that is there is our shadow. And these are all parts of ourselves that were repressed, rejected. And that's why a lot of healers, they always say, you gotta be positive and you gotta be love and light and you gotta think positive and that's how you're gonna manifest and all of these things. Well, they're also misleading you. Part
Mm-hmm.
of the human experience is actually to go into the depths of the rawness, of the vulnerableness, of the pain, of the
Mm-hmm.
suffering, of the things that we are sad about. Otherwise, we're spiritually bypassing. This is about integrating all parts of self, and that's why I think is the most powerful work. I found, I don't know if you know of internal family systems, but it's basically they call it parts work. And this is like finding the parts of yourself. It is like a shadow work, being able to find the things that have rejected or other people have rejected about you, and to love it, to accept it, to have like compassion for yourself. And I really feel like that's really what the journey is about, is how do I really love all of me, every part of me, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that people have judged or I have judged. Often we're like the biggest judgers of ourselves. It's not even the other people, it's really ourselves. And really starting to come into this self-love is a really powerful place to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I, in my own healing journey, have experienced the pits of hell, as you described, that feeling of like really going deep into the depths of places I've never shown light on. And for me, that I'm grateful that I was brave enough to do that because I feel like a lot of people are really scared to do that. And I think that's kind of what I want to ask you first is like, how do you guide clients through that like scared moment of like about to confront something, but they're scared. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I often find people come to me because they're like, something resonates with them on an energetic level. And they're like, well, I feel like you can help me, but I'm also afraid of what I'm going to discover. So I'm a hypnotherapist. So that's the RTT work. I really help people access this part of their mind, the subconscious. That is really what I say is the gateway to understanding yourself and getting to the root cause of the pain. And people always say, well, what if I find something I don't want to know? Or what if I find something that scares me? Well, yeah, you may. I don't really tell people there's no possibility of that. I say, well, we don't know what's been blocked. We don't know what's been repressed because, your brain's main job is to keep you safe. And if something happened when you were a child, or if you had a really traumatic experience, often it will suppress these things in order to help you manage your life, to help you cope. But what happens is as we grow older, this thing is still here. It's still there. It's buried underneath so much stuff. But when we start to do the healing work, that stuff we slowly start to unpack all of these things. And what is really the root cause of our suffering begins to surface. And so I tell people, you know what? You're going to find the root cause of your pain. What would it be like? It's like going to the dentist. You have a horrible tooth and it's like it's aching and you're in pain and you're just like, oh my gosh, dentist, please take this thing out. And you're not even going to think twice that you're going to have a missing tooth. You're just in pain and you want relief. And that's what this type of work is. You're in pain, you want relief. Well, let's get in there. Let's find this pain and this suffering. Let's process it. Let's feel it. Let's move through it. And you're going to come out the other side a different person. You're going to actually be able to transform and heal yourself. And I'm just the guide for that.
Mm.
And this is, you may encounter things. I know I did. I had very deep, buried, repressed memories that I didn't even know existed. But again, it was my root cause of my suffering. So I always tell people, sometimes we have to step into the fear because that's what courage is. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And what do you get on the other side? You get freedom.
Yeah, which is priceless and worth it for sure.
Mhm. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. It's powerful. And on the other side, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really glad that I did that thing. Because
Yeah.
it was really challenging and it was really hard. And you can kind of give yourself like a pat on the back every time that you do it. I really believe that's part of the hero's journey. The
Mm.
hero's journey, stepping in, something happens, something comes up, the surfaces in your life, and it's difficult, it's painful, and you feel like, oh my God, I'm in this darkness. The dark night of the soul, as they call it, and feeling like I don't know how to get my way out. I am done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm in pain. I'm suffering. But there's always a gift in the darkness. And once you just accept that and you become more curious, you start to find the pattern, you start to find the wound, and you start to find what needs to heal. And then it gets easier and easier as you do it over and over and over again.
Hmm. What's your opinion on the healing never ending? Like, is there ever a point where it ends? Which I feel like I know the answer, but what's your opinion on that?
Well, I'll tell you this. When I first started this whole process in my own spiritual awakening, I was trying to go 1,000 miles per hour. I was like, how fast can I possibly go to get to the end of this journey? Because I really hate it and I don't want to do this anymore. And I used to have mentors tell me, they're like, well, the healing journey really never ends, Brooke. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, there's not like a fast track way to do this. Like there's no, and they're like, well, no, the healing journey is not linear and it's going to continue to evolve. And that is exactly what has happened for me. But each time I feel like we kind of go through each thing in our life, we start to get new perspective. And I think that's what the healing journey is all about,
Hmm.
is we get like this new awareness or this new perspective of life, of other people, the people that have hurt us. Often we like want to be the victim, but then we can kind of shift out of victim mode and then also be like, okay, well, wait a second. I get to choose in my story. I actually get to like step back into my power. I'm not that little girl that, my parents have abandoned. I'm not that little girl anymore that got sexually abused. I'm not that little girl anymore. Whatever the story is that you carry,
Hmm.
you get to switch it. You get to flip the script. Or you get to choose to stay in the victim mode.
Hmm.
If we're victims of life, that's where we continue to suffer. So it's about kind of rising above that and seeing that we can do things differently. and we can look at our story differently and we can use it to empower ourselves. And I feel like, obviously this is what you do, right? What we all do that have been on the healing journey is we take our pain, we turn it into purpose, and we know that as we continue to shift, we're always healing. We're always like finding something else, right? We're like uncovering these layers and letting the flower blossom. And we're finally getting into that space where it's like each time we kind of go into that lotus, right? We go through the mud and then we see the beauty of, okay, well, now I understand why I needed to experience that or why I needed to feel that.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way to say that. And I used to get exhausted by that idea, but it's a very beautiful thing because healing is not always painful either. It's multi-leveled. It's so many different, it's so complex, and it's not always going into the depths of hell into your soul and like coming out a better person. It can be very light and fun sometimes too. And that's I think
Yeah.
what newbies forget of like starting this journey. But anyway, you're so knowledgeable, and I want to know how you got here. Like, how did you acquire all this knowledge? Where did it start for you?
So it started in 2017. I broke free from a cult. So I
Okay.
was raised in a cult. It was like third generation. And I also was in an abusive marriage for 17 years. So really experiencing those things in my life, I decided that one, I didn't resonate with the cult anymore. It didn't feel like it was true. I started to discover a lot of lies, and I felt very betrayed. I felt very angry. And that meaning like leaving meant losing my family, my
Mhm.
parents, my grandmother, other family that was in their religion. And then I was losing my marriage. So it was a very difficult time. And at that time I felt like, I don't know if I want to go on, but I had two boys and they were my world. They kept me here. They kept me grounded to this earth at that time. And I just started to do the work. I started doing the therapy and I started trying to discover, what are the tools that I can just cope? But I literally was just in survival. I was coping. That's it. And in 2020, my then ex-husband died of a drug overdose. And that grief really ignited this awakening in me to want to understand, why am I here? What is the purpose of all this pain? Why am I continuing to suffer? And that really just threw me on even more of a deeper healing journey where I discovered anything and everything from what I do now. So RTT, helping access the subconscious because I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and I was just getting really stuck. Traditional talk therapy wasn't doing it for me. So I started like trying everything and anything, like, please just somebody take away this pain. And that's when I found somatics and internal family systems and hypnosis. And these were all beautiful tools to help me connect me back to my body to kind of get back into safety. And I said, every woman needs to experience this and every man too. But I mean, I feel like women have been so oppressed for so long. A lot of us have suffered um, in many ways, and so I had suffered so much being oppressed in the cult that I was in and the relationships I was in that I needed that. I needed that empowerment to see that I could actually heal and I could show others how to do it. And that's why I do what I do, and I'm so passionate about it because I feel that there's an easier way. We don't have to struggle forever and ever. Sometimes people are like, well, I've been in therapy for 10 years, but I'm still struggling. Well, because we're not accessing it in a holistic way. Like it's very mind, body, spirit connection. And that's where the power is.
Wow, that is a story.
Yes, that was a short version.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you went through all that, but clearly it's beautiful in the end, which is lovely. And I think you're so strong, and it's really cool that you turned all this whole story of yours in with so much complexity and pain into something to help others that are going through the same thing or something similar. I think that's really cool. Um, I want to talk to you about, which as I was reading your like website and stuff, I was curious about this too. I see a lot of spiritual psychosis in the community, and you coming out of a cult, I'm sure maybe you experienced that. Like, what is your opinion on that and how to balance that with healing? Because also, if you're teaching people how to heal holistically and spiritually, how do you balance like the spiritual bypassing or getting too deep into it or stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Yes, I definitely experienced spiritual psychosis. I didn't even know it was happening, honestly, at the time. There was a lot of fear leaving that cult because the cult was very doomsday fear-based paradigm. So I felt a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of fear. Oh my gosh, is God going to come destroy me because I'm leaving? And like, am I doing the right thing? Who can I trust? Can I trust anyone? Coming out of that experience. So that was really difficult for me. Um, and I spiritually bypassed for a very long time, to be honest, because it was the only way to keep myself safe. I couldn't process or do any of the harder stuff yet. I just wasn't there. My body didn't feel safe enough. I was in too much fear. I was struggling. It really in the past probably 3 years, I have been able to finally access the different parts of myself and really move through the fear and to let go of the past, really to unravel the religious programming. So it took a long time. So I want to tell people that, if you're coming out of any of these experiences, because being in a cult and being in an abusive relationship is basically one and the same. They
Mm-hmm.
use the same tactics, they use the same type of control, they use the same type of manipulation, the gaslighting, it's all the same experience. So it really can keep your brain really confused, and a lot of fog and a lot of like, well, which way do I turn? And your nervous system is in like constant trauma responses, flight, freeze, or fawn, and you don't even really know kind of how to see your way out. So I always tell people that get support. You know, get the support. I didn't do that at first. And I think I struggled even more because I thought in my own trauma response, I can do it myself. I can figure it out. Um, because that's what I was kind of taught, like figure things out on your own. I was always kind of on my own doing that. So it's just get the support, get the help, be humble enough to say, I need this. And it doesn't matter how vulnerable I have to be. I need somebody to just show me the way. That will help 1000%.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Because you need that realistic anchor that sees things from an outside perspective
Yes, exactly.
to make you feel more sane for sure.
Because we can't always see the forest through the trees. So we can think that we know the way or we can figure it out, but our ego gets really stuck in its rightness and thinking this is the right way. But if someone else can kind of be the devil's advocate and kind of help us see a different way or a different way of thinking or being, we can kind of start to use critical thinking, which may not have been something that we were allowed to use in the past because we were told who we had to be or we were told how we were supposed to think. So it's about being able to kind of learn this give and take of discernment and critical thinking. And then once you start to do that, you start to access your inner knowing, your intuition.
Yeah, it sounds like you rebuilt a new identity, or not a new one, but you found like your actual identity, like through all the conditioning, you know?
Yes, I did. I mean, I shattered everything that I'd ever known and rebuilt from the ground up, 1000%.
Mm-hmm. When you've gone through, and when, if a listener relates to this, when you've gone through so much pain and traumatic experiences, how do you, through your healing and becoming a more healed version of yourself, or however you want to phrase that, how do you stay like open to good experiences? Because if you're so used to chaos and the conditioning, I feel like it's really hard to stay open to like the opposite, you know?
Well, the opposite doesn't feel safe.
Right.
We
It's not
don't realize
comfortable.
it. Yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
don't realize this, but it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel comfortable. Um, I had, only experienced very volatile, abusive relationships and toxicity. And so even when I left my marriage, I kind of continued to attract the same thing. So just cliff notes here, guys. You will continue to attract the same thing if you don't heal yourself. Um, and then as I started to do some more work on myself, I ended up discovering, a very healthy, conscious partner. And at the time, I didn't realize it because I thought he wasn't safe because
Right.
it was every opposite of anything I've ever known. And I kind of wanted to just be like, stay away. I don't know. I think I can't trust you because I was having to learn trust again, or actually ever learning how to trust, period. I'd never had that experience. And so it was really a teaching lesson for me to see. how someone can hold space for you, can be a safe partner, and can be able to help you as a support system kind of heal. And that's really what it was. It was a huge gift for me to be able to be with someone that could hold that space, because then I finally could unravel from everything that I had experienced. So just know that if things feel safe and comfortable, it's probably because it's familiar.
Yeah.
And if things don't, then you're on the right path.
Yeah.
On the right path of kind of changing and rewiring you biologically and mentally, and starting to help you see that, oh, wait a second, there is a different way here. And this maybe is more of a healthy relationship than I've ever had.
I'm literally experiencing that right now. I've only ever been in toxic, unstable, insecure relationships, and I'm just now starting to date a man who is probably the most secure and stable person I've ever met in my life, and it is so disturbing.
Congratulations. So that's a
Thank
huge
you.
thing. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I find my brain trying to find things wrong all the time or questioning everything. And I have to really, and that's what I mean by like building that new identity, is because if you're not solid in yourself and your boundaries and your standards and like what you want and don't want, and like connected to your intuition and how you feel, like it's hard to know what's real and what's healthy and what's not. And yeah, you're so right. Like safety sometimes feel real safety
Mhm.
sometimes feels unsafe.
Yes.
Yes.
It's very hard to decipher too, because I always like to talk from like a trauma-informed perspective. Is it's, if you have all this trauma in relationships where you've been betrayed, you've been hurt, it's been toxic, you often will only look at things from that lens.
Mhm.
And so anything can re-trigger that. And so when you first get into a healthy relationship, you'll start to see how that surfaces over and over and over and over again. And hopefully the other partner can see that this is just your past and it's just your trauma, and they can hold some space for you instead of reacting from their own wounds. So that's the real key and the difference. You're going to have to start to decipher and use your intuition for what's really going on, and start to get that awareness. And this is where a key thing is, again, you need to get the support to help you see through it. Because when you're in it, you're not going to be able to kind of distinguish that until you kind of get stronger intuitive gut feeling there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You
Mhm.
said that perfectly. Um, yeah, I feel like the man I'm with now, he um is informed on where I've been, and if I'm having a little moment of like my anxious attachment is flaring up, or like I'm questioning everything, or I'm having a little bit of an emotional moment, he's able to be like, "Hey, everything's good. You're kind of making stuff up in your head right now. We're good." So having that reassurance and choosing the right partner who is stable enough, exactly like you said, is also very important. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's really beautiful. Because that's such a gift for you. And I've experienced that too. And it's very loving, and you don't realize if you've never had that experience before, it's no wonder of course you're going to doubt it. Of course you're going to question it. You're going to try to do that 1,000 times probably before you kind of really learn your lesson. And I think it's about being able to start to have so much self-awareness where you can sit with yourself and you can decipher the difference between your trauma and the stories from your trauma and from your past, and actually what's really happening right now in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the key to healing, to be in the present moment, to be aware enough to observe the stories that are in your mind and see that they're actually happening from past experiences, and it's not what's happening right now. And that is where you'll start to kind of come out of that old version of yourself and shed layers of the old version, and really be able to access the ability to now not need your partner to hold so much space for you. You can actually hold space for yourself. You can
Yes.
actually, oh, wait a second. I do know this is my trauma. It's okay. I know what's the story that's going on. Oh, I know why. This story is that's re-triggering this story from what happened in my last relationship. And I need to be conscious enough to not throw this on him all the time, or project onto him, or make this about somebody else when this has nothing to do with him. Because
Yes.
that's going to get old after a while too. So you have to make sure you're getting that self-awareness.
Yes. And that's what's been the hardest part, is not seeking external validation and like constant reassurance because you need that strong identity within yourself. You can't always look outside of yourself for that. And I just want to say if anyone listening is doing that and having that self awareness, that is so badass to go through what you've been through and then to be strong enough to like hold yourself in your healing is very cool. And I think it's not talked about enough how hard that actually is because it feels like you're dying at times, like having to
Yeah.
walk yourself through that safety feeling. Um
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
that's my
that's
two
big.
cents.
I want to say something about the anxious attachment because that's definitely what I have too.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've become, you can become more securely attached for anybody knows. If you don't even know what attachment style is, look it up, take a quiz. You can take, there's a ton of free ones out there.
Yes.
Find that out, get that self-awareness about yourself because that's how you show up in all of your relationships. And neediness and clinginess, if you have an anxious attachment, can actually be like energetically repulsive to somebody.
Yes.
So it's almost like you need to be able to hold space for yourself. And that really comes with inner child healing. And that is where the power lies. We were talking about shadow work. Well, inner child work is a little bit like the shadow work too, because that little girl in you has had experiences that made her feel rejected and made her feel abandoned and made her feel sad. And you need to help her process those. And it's part of your job to connect with that. And when you do that, like you are really coming into your own power because your inner child is actually running the show and nobody knows it. She's like in the driver's seat and you're in the passenger seat and she's telling you what to do, how to act, what to be like, who to pick, like because of all of these rejection and abandonment wounds. So when you start to heal her, you're going to really show up as the woman that you are.
Thank you for that. I needed to hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right because it all it all stems from the way my dad treated me. I was kicked out so many times when I was little. Like he always rejected me, and now we have a really good relationship, and we went to therapy, made amends, and it's really beautiful our relationship now. But I still have those wounds, and I need to work through, and I'm getting really good at it. But you're so right. It's all how you grew up, and our first relationship was with our parents. It all starts
Yes.
there. Yes. Speaking of
Yes. And if
self-awareness,
it wasn't safe,
sorry, you
go
go.
ahead.
You go. You go.
No, you were blipping out a little bit. Go ahead.
I was about to change topics, so you say what you're gonna say.
No. Oh,
Oh,
I was just going to say, that father wound can really, really mess us up in relationships because if our father rejected us, then we're going to try to find that in any partner that we possibly can just to kind of heal that wound. And it's really not that partner's job. It's our job to take that on. And if we can't reconcile with dad, then it's really our job to look at and heal it ourselves.
yes, absolutely. And speaking of self-awareness and being self-aware enough to do that for yourself, how can, if people are going through a tough relationship or maybe even a cult or just kind of looking around them and thinking like, oh, this is kind of not good for me, what are some of the red flags people can look out for that kind of cue that that's an unsafe situation?
Sure. I would say if you feel at all like you are being controlled, that's the biggest one. If you're being controlled and you're feeling like, why am I feeling like I'm in a prison or I feel like I want to break free? Well, then there's some control going on and you want to dig deeper there. Well, how controlled am I? What is really going on here? And how have I not been able to use my voice or be my true self? If you're in an abusive relationship, really looking at how is that person accountable? Do they hold themselves accountable? Are they able to have deep conversations and meet you with your emotions? Are they able to, or are they always blaming on you? Are they blaming everything on you? It's your fault. You're too sensitive. Something's wrong with you. You must be crazy, or that didn't happen. How are they really using these things against you and not really being able to hold themselves accountable for what they do that is also hurting the relationship? I think I say that's a big one because a lot of those times emotional abuse can be really insidious and you don't really know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, physical abuse, you're going to know that you are in an abusive relationship. If you're in a cult, I would say if you can't leave that community without being shunned or ostracized, you're in a cult. And that's not love, that's conditional love. and just realizing that in many ways, you probably haven't even realized that you've been controlled, manipulated, and gaslighted for
Mhm.
years. So kind of taking a look at that and reflecting. And then I think the best thing is always to Google it, right? How
Right.
to know, right? That's the great old Google. You can go down. That's how I figured out I was even in a narcissistic relationship. That's how I figured out I wasn't a cult. I used the ability to say, you know what, I need to find all the knowledge I possibly can about this and find these things, reflect on these. Okay, how does this show up in my relationship? And then continue to use that reflection to ask myself the deeper questions. That may not be easy, but it's going to help you know, okay, this is what's really happening. And now how do I get out of this? How do I find my way out?
Yeah, those are absolutely huge. I totally agree. And when you started to have this awareness of, okay, I'm in this bad situation, and you started to get yourself out and heal that, what you went through. I know you said RTT has been huge for you. Other and NLP too. Would you say these are the number one tools that helped you move through this? Like, what tools and modalities did you lean on to help you through this?
I definitely think those top two are the best because it helped me understand how my brain processes things.
Yeah.
It also helped me to access like kind of the root cause of my pain. But then I really later learned later on we can only cognitively do so much in the brain. There is the nervous system connection. So the next component of it was I realizing that I needed to connect my mind and my body. So because my body was still feeling like we're in fear, like there's danger. We don't know if someone's going to destroy us because of the cult's beliefs and because of being in an abusive relationship and always having to fear and walk on eggshells. I was realizing that I needed to connect back to my body, feel safety in my body. And so I always tell people like this is a job that you have to do too. It's not just in the mind. It's somatic therapy I found was really helpful to access the feelings and the sensations to start to be connected because I was extremely dissociated.
Mm,
I was sexually abused when I was young, and I really found out that was the cause of the reason why I had dissociated for so long, that my brain didn't feel safe. It was trying to keep me safe. And so no wonder I didn't connect a lot to the body. It was just coping, I was managing. And this is a great way to access your inner knowing. Your body has a lot of wisdom.
mhm,
And if you connect with your body, you're going to get more of that intuitiveness. And I did that through yoga. I did that with anything that slowed me down and let me connect to myself. Meditation was another huge one to kind of quiet my brain and just be, just be in the stillness because we are so bombarded with so much stuff all the time, social media, the TV, like we're always doing. And if you can just practice being sometimes, you're going to start to be able to hear that little inner voice that's been kind of guiding you all along, and you'll be able to know your next step.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of, which is, I hope this doesn't deter anyone from healing. I'm sure it doesn't, but it sounds like a lot of crying because I feel like when you start to feel, when you
Yes,
start to
yes.
feel safe, it's like a relief, but it's also like when you start to connect back to your body, you start to face all the pain that's been living in there. And then when you cry, you're releasing, or however you release. It's definitely needed. I like that you said
It is.
yoga. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, the more I slowed down my body, in meditation and yoga, I started qigong. I don't know if it's a very like it's a moving meditation, if you will.
Okay.
And the more that I did those things, the more I started to access those emotions. But I had repressed them for
Mm-hmm.
so long. It didn't mean they were not there. It just meant I had stuffed them down into my body. But that was also causing me a lot of physical illness. I had some struggles with my health and really recognizing this is very interrelated. Like if you repress your emotions, well, this is why physical manifestations of sickness come out in your body. Why you gain
Mm-hmm.
weight, why you struggle with high cortisol, like why, all of these things start to pop up the older you get. So it is actually our job to feel our tears and let them flow. And it's cathartic. It's the way our body expresses itself and all of the inner turmoil. It's very healing. And so if we repress for a long time, yeah, it can be a little overwhelming. I feel like you're like drowning in a sea, um, at times. I know that's been like that for me, but it's all about having to feel. That's where you find your power is in feeling and moving. It's where the transformation happens. Otherwise, you're just kind of going around in the same loop and staying stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as someone who has been through all this and is healing from it, would you say you're, I'm sure it's a yes, hopefully. Would you say you're in a better place now? Like you feel more secure and you feel like you have a solid identity and like, you know what I mean? Like, is there, I want people to feel hope for their own journeys. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that there becomes more and more security. You begin to start to feel safe with feeling your emotions. I really work with people on doing that because when you can let the subconscious mind know that it's safe to feel your emotions, you start to actually heal. Because otherwise, we're just continuing to do the same coping mechanisms that we've always done. So whether that's drinking or that's shopping or that's binge eating, whatever it is that is your brain's drug of choice, okay, you're going to continue to do that because you're just suppressing the emotion.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Like last week, I had a very tumultuous week. I was re-triggered. I was re-triggered by, my mother because I hadn't spoken to her in 4 years.
Mhm.
And when I did speak to her, it just was not a loving place. And I felt that abandonment all over again. And I felt the emotion of it. And I was like I was drowning because it was part of having to feel. I needed to actually have that experience. I needed to have that trigger to see where I still was stuck, where I still needed to heal. And so I just sat with it. So instead of me repressing it or moving away from it, I just sat with it and I just cried and I cried and I just let it all out. But now on the other side of it, I'm like, oh my God, that was so freeing. That was so freeing. I now am realizing that I was still chasing my mother's validation a little bit. I was still wanting her to like see or want me or want to listen to me. And it's just that little girl in me that's like, hey, mom, I'm here. Like, why don't you love me? And just realizing that I'm not going to have that experience. And so when you come into the acceptance of the grief and realizing that this is not going to be my experience and you just let yourself feel it, you can move past it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you'll, at least from my experience, when you're healing from this, all of these things coming up, we've covered a lot. So a lot of this stuff, you notice you know you're healing, and I saw this on Instagram, but it's true. You know you're healing when you handle situations differently than you used to. And I think you letting like yourself just feel the emotions, like you said, rather than pushing them away or just moving on or suppressing them or whatever you used to do. That's so much different, and you can move past it better, and you're not going to hold it in your body, or it's not going to flare up into a bigger breakdown or something like that. And that's healing. It's not that you're never going to get triggered again. It's just that you handle it differently and in a more healthy way.
Yeah. And I think every time, I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm never going to be triggered by my mother again. I'm sure I
Right.
will, right? I'm sure it's going to come up again because our brain can't make sense of these experiences of when we've been rejected or abandoned because that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, right? Because why would a mother ever do that? But at the same time, it's being able to say, okay, well, I can't make sense of this. So what can I do with this? And that is I can heal. I can move forward and I can love this part of myself that feels sad and abandoned and scared and afraid and just let it know that I'm here and I'm not going to let it feel abandoned. Like I can come back into my power and my own story of like, how do I really want to feel here?
Mm-hmm. Do you do something every day, roughly, or whatever, like every day to come back to yourself? Like, what is the everyday, like, healing and being there for yourself look like for you?
Yeah, I do have I have to have a routine. The complex PTSD is very real. It's still there. Doesn't mean that it doesn't come pop back up. I do a lot of meditation. I usually meditate at least once a day, if not twice. So I'll do that for 20 or 30 minutes. Just kind of quiet, sit with myself. No thoughts. I use a mantra-based meditation, so really slowing down my brain and just letting myself, okay, well, what's going to come here, and then just sitting with my feelings. What am I feeling right now? And asking myself that, what's going on right now? What do I need to attend to, or what do I need to pay attention to so that I can feel safe, that I can feel secure, so I can feel whatever I need to feel. And that's kind of a practice that I have now incorporated in my life. And then I usually do some type of body-based thing. So whether that's Pilates, whether that's Qigong, whether that is strength training, I'm constantly connecting with my body because it's so important in this journey for me to let my body know I'm safe, to allow myself to hold up space and just be.
Yeah, I love that. That is exactly what I do every day. Some kind of some kind of movement based on my cycle personally, and then um mindset work and connecting to my spirituality. Yeah, I think those are two like non-negotiable things
Yes,
when you've been through what we've been through and what millions of other women have been through, that's definitely a must for sure.
it is. Yeah. And if we don't, it's going to show up some way. Like
Yes.
we're ignoring ourselves and we're not taking care of ourselves. So it's really hard because women have really been taught not to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about you're going to have to train yourself to create this practice. Otherwise, you won't do it and you'll make excuses or you'll say, I don't have time for it. But it's just about making time for yourself and learning that you get to be a priority.
Yeah, and I find that when you make yourself a priority, everything else thrives.
Yes.
Everything. Yeah.
Yes. It really does.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Do you feel called to share anything else for the listeners or anything that you have going on that you want to share? Anything at all?
Yeah. I actually have a book launch March 25th. Um,
Ooh.
so it's called Shattered, Broken, and Beautiful, Losing My Religion and Finding Faith. So it's really the beginning of my story of being raised as a Jehovah's Witness in this cult-like system, what that was like, it was like what it was like being a woman in this space and how I really healed from this and also healed from being in the abusive relationship, but also witnessing how this relationship was also for my highest good to be able to heal as well, to see what I didn't love about myself, and have this spiritual awakening to kind of come home to me. So that is being launched. So I'm very excited about that. So just kind of getting ready for that. So that'll be available on Amazon if anybody's interested.
I'm fucking interested.
Thank you.
That is so cool. Good for you. That's amazing. And you also wrote The Grief Monster. Is that correct? You have another book, right?
I do. Yeah, that's a children's book.
Yeah.
When my boys lost their father, which I did talk about, that really was just birthed from that experience and finding there really wasn't a lot of books for children, younger children about grief.
Mm-hmm.
And that weren't like very direct. A lot of them like kind of used fables and stories to kind of talk about grief. And I was like, no, let's just talk about it. Like this is a real conversation and kids are not taught how to process their grief. Adults are not like taught how to process their grief and we
Mm-hmm.
can drown in grief, literally. So I wanted to create this beautiful book, and the grief monster, he's really actually you kind of love him. He's really adorable. If anybody wants to go and look, it's about a little boy that loses his dad, and the grief monster comes to visit, and he's here to help him learn how to process his grief. And, I think it's really powerful. I'm actually going to begin working with kids that are, foster children and are struggling with grief because of this story. So I feel like it's something that I am very still want to help people with because young kids are suffering from that.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I have a lot of moms listening. I know that. So I wanted to mention that for sure.
Oh, well, thank you.
Of course. And you have a podcast, right?
I do. I actually have two podcasts. It's Goddess Rising, which, I talk a lot about, codependency and attachment and abusive relationships and healing from that, really being able to step into your power. That is for my women that are trying to get out of these abusive relationships and heal from them. And then my other one is really for cult diaries. It's for being in the cults and helping people process religious programming, how to heal from it, and letting people tell their stories on there as well. So if anyone's
Mhm.
interested in that and that they're curious about telling their story about leaving religion, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Oh my God, I have two new podcasts to listen to. Amazing.
Thank you.
Of course. Is there anything else you want to share before we go? You feel complete? I feel
No,
good.
I feel so complete. This was amazing. Thank you, Mackenzie, for having me on your show.
Of course, you're so knowledgeable, and I know I said that, but you're very, very cool. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to rate and review Divine Gossip on whatever platform you listened in on. Head to themackenziecollective.com to work with me further. If you have any questions or have any topics you want me to cover or any guests you want me to have on, please email all of that to info@themackenziecollective.com or go to the episode description to fill out my Google form. I love you. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.